So in essence, and this begs the question, so a few years ago we swept a significant amount from workers' comp, and one would arguably say that those dollars should have been returned in some fashion to the people who are paying the premiums for workers' comp. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, as I said before, in the last couple of years, along with the sweeps, we've also been cutting taxes. So we have to sometimes move the money to different places to continue to keep functioning as we cut taxes and lose that income.
So on the merits, and I'm just going to ask you this straight up. So if you pay into a fund, and that fund's supposed to provide benefits for workers' compensation, and the fund is accruing revenue faster or in excess of what the needs are, wouldn't you reasonably expect that there should be some premium coming back to you for excess payment?
Well, as I said before...
As a person paying into the system.
No, well, you can't get too close so that you have an accident, because when an economy breaks, you remember 2008, everything was good, and then one day the bottom dropped, and when that happened, we needed to have a lot of money. Matter of fact, we had to borrow money, if I remember when that happened. So what we're doing is we're making a decision that we can do this amount as we see the future, and it will not do damage. We can do it, and we can take a certain amount out, and that amount works. Okay. And if we had to replace it, we would replace it.
So I'll be a little bit more straightforward. So when are we going to stop using workers' comp and Power Authority and other authorities and corporations as cash cows for backdoor funding of our budget? When will we stop doing that?
With all due respect, they're not cash cows. We're using, I think the program we're using it for here is a very important program, and I think it's when we get to discussing that further, I think we'll think that that's something that's very important that we're doing. So we're not doing anything that is, we're not going out drinking and dancing. We're doing things that help the people, and I know that's why you're here, to help the people, and that's what we think this will do. And this is our version of what we think is the best thing to do.
Sure. We're also interested in fairness, and we're also interested in fairness to people. So when we raise revenues, so if we have a surcharge or a tax or an Article 18A surcharge, which we've extended endlessly, or if we have a gross receipts tax on petroleum, those are designated as revenues to the state for general purposes. Collection of revenue for workers' comp is not deemed to be a general fund revenue source. So when you deny that we're taking this corporation, the Workers' Comp Board, and taking money from it for general purposes, and I know you take offense at me calling it a cash cow, but we're milking it here, and we've milked it before. So why, if we are so concerned about, and we are concerned about meeting the needs of the state, why aren't we doing it up front with known revenues and known sources of funding that are specifically made available for general fund purposes? Why are we taking money from a fund that wasn't intended to be a general revenue source and milking it? Why?
Well, we're not milking it. Those are nice names, but I don't think they are.
It's true.
Again, I'm going to say the value of what that money will be used to do will mean that those families where someone gets sick and somebody has to go and help that person, we will have the payment for them. They're workers. They're the ones that are putting it in. The people who will take advantage of it are the people who have put the money in. So we have not taken the money away from them. We've, matter of fact, used the money to do something that will be good for the workers. So I think if they had to vote on it, which I'm not calling for a vote, but if they were to have to vote on it, they would be in favor of it.
So I guess the question would be, with that said, what's the value of that money to the hardworking family or farm or other employer that takes that money and contributes it to the Workers' Comp Fund in good faith?
Which is going to do something to help them if somebody in their family needs help and they have to take time off. That would pay for it. So in a way, they're paying for it as they do it. So it's not taking away anything from them. It's giving them services.
On the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you. I think I have a little more time than Mr. Goodell, but maybe not too much more. So in regard to this issue, so this one issue just is illustrative of coming to us with bills that are just coming into print, last-minute discussions. We continue to take one-shots. Here's a one-shot revenue from an entity never intended to fund state general fund and putting it to general fund purposes. So this is just the warm-up. This is the very first bill, but it is reflective of a process which we all know, regardless of how much information we've been given prior, has been behind closed doors. As we've heard from my colleagues very gently, no financial plan, walking around in the dark, a myopic process that, despite changes in leadership, new governor, new leader of the Assembly, new Speaker of the Assembly, new leader of the Senate, any of whom could have said, wait a minute, let's look at this process and fix it. I, leader, refuse to participate unless the minorities of both houses are present, unless there's an open debate and discussion, unless the bills are made available to age. I refuse. I'm speaking parenthetically for any of the leaders of our state. But yet it hasn't happened. And I've had people say to me, oh, individuals can't make a difference. I disagree. And I think everyone in this chamber is living proof of that. Individuals, the work you do, the work we do in our districts, the work we do in Albany makes a difference in the lives and futures of our community. My big frustration with this whole process is we have leaders who could lead by example in a very positive way, but instead have chosen to rush a process back to the same old sad story of message of necessity, of meeting behind closed doors, of shoveling things at people at the last minute, not giving them time to digest fully. It's not necessary. Why are we doing it? Why do we continue? Is it because we've always done it that way? Seems to be. Is it because we've heard me talk about this, because we've sworn fealty to our Lord, and we don't upset the Lord of the kingdom because they may take offense and diminish our stature, maybe cut our committee assignments, or give us some trouble in the district? Is that what we're afraid of? Are we afraid of losing our jobs? Is that why we perpetuate a system of leadership that is insular and all-controlling? So if you look deep in your souls, you know what I'm talking about. I was here as staff for 21 years. I've been here as a member for 10 years. The only thing that's changed are the faces. Some of you I've known and seen for many years. Some of you are brand new. Brand new or not, we're all part of a process that doesn't seem to change because no one really wants it to change, because the leadership wants to hold on to their power and rule absolutely. I'm very disappointed in the process. We can do better. I've said that to this chamber before. We all say we will do better. Well, when will we, Mr. Speaker? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Tedesco.
On the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Tedesco.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, I've been listening to the discussion and the debate, and I've been here a while, as many of you have, and I'll tell you the truth, I can hardly believe my ears. I've seen a lot, and I've heard a lot on this floor, and I thought I have seen and heard everything. But this goes beyond the pale today. You and I were elected, we were hired, we were given the honor of this job to be a public servant, a state representative in the New York State Assembly. We weren't hired by the governor. We weren't hired by a faceless bureaucrat. We were hired by the most important people in this representative democracy, the voters, the taxpayers of New York State, the 19.5 million people of New York State. They expect us to be representatives. That's the job. They expect us to read the bills, not be a bunch of Nancy Pelosi's, get it passed, you'll find out what it is later on. Not be nice girls and boys like the governor wants and sit in your seat, keep your mouth shut, pass the budget, and talk about it and maybe find out about it later. And to suggest, and this is what goes down the pale, that as a state representative, I'm expected to read the newspapers to know what's in the budget bills that I'm going to be reacting to as the individual, as a part of this group, as the legislature, to be a check and balance on each other, majority and minority, and the governor. Mr. Farrell, you want me to read the newspapers to find out what's in this 11 budget bills? That's beyond the pale. To suggest that to be serious about that. I've got to read the Times-Union, the Gazette, the Post, my local news, to find out what are in these budget bills. You talked about these tablets on our desk here. We worked hard to get those done. It was the right thing to do. It's not easy to change the Constitution. It's important to get it right if you touch the Constitution, because our founding fathers were wise. They did the right thing. They didn't know we'd have tablets and websites and computers and things of that nature, but they were wise enough to say, as a representative, your bills should be on your desk for 3 days, and you should read the bills, and you can't represent unless you read the bills, and you're a part of that wonderful checks and balances of the separate branches of government. And you allow the fourth estate to be kind of that fourth check, to be able to understand what's taking place also, and to listen and see the debate and see the discussion. Well, how do you debate it if you can't read it? If you can't pass on to your professionals, we have some questions. Can you help us with that? Go do the research. Come back and answer. They don't have time to do the research. We don't have time to really read the bills when you give us a message of necessity. And you know exactly what these messages of necessity have become. They've become a message of political expediency. Obviously, you as the majorities and the governor don't want us to read the bills. You don't want us to understand the intricacies of the legislation you're putting forward. You want us to support $154 billion being spent of taxpayers' money on a promise and a prayer. That's not what a public servant does. They also said, we need emergency legislation sometime. Yeah, we do need messages of necessity. You know what they're for? An emergency. 3 months of an opportunity to do a budget, and people say, well, it's better to get a good late budget than an on-time budget. That's no guarantee whenever you're going to get a budget, whether it's on time or late, it's going to be better or better than what we've got right now. It could be even worse if we don't open up the shades as we open up the curtains, because that's what you've done. You've done some window dressing here. You've told me to read the newspaper so I know what's in this bill that we're debating right now. I read the newspapers, okay? And if I believe everything that's in the newspapers, I'm in as much trouble as you are trying to keep the system the way it is right now. Totally inappropriate. My colleagues, your constituents, your bosses who sent you here, want you to know what's in every single bill that we vote on today. They want it in this tablet. It hasn't changed. It's made us more efficient. It's saved us millions of dollars a year because you don't see that paper spread over the place. Mother Nature is smiling now. We're not throwing tons of ink-filled paper into landfills. That was all well and good. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be in this tablet for 3 days so I can read it out of it, understand it, and debate it, and be a real representative. If you want to be a real representative and stop the temptation, this is not truth in spending. This is darkness in spending. We don't know where the monies go because we don't know the end result. So, my colleagues, if you want to change the way we do business, if you don't want people, you could say it's a good day here now. Nobody's left in handcuffs. We don't want that to continue anymore. We want to change the process. We don't want to allow the temptations to be there. The hidden sources of slush funds of money in budgets where people can game the system. If you're going to change that, we should all be able to read it. So like the federal prosecutor says, if we see something, we can say something. It's very hard to see something when there's no verbiage and there are no bills to read until 20 minutes before we're supposed to come to this floor and do the bidding of the taxpayers we represent. So, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, it's extremely disappointing. I think it's disappointing to the people you represent. And if this is the way we're going to continue to do business, it's a sorry state of affairs for our representative democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Mr. Farrell yields, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Denny. You said a few minutes ago that it's our job to be on time with the budget.
Yes, that's one of the reasons you have time.
Well, how much time do we have? I mean, we have about 9 hours, 8 hours, 8.5 hours,
Yeah.
right, to be on time.
Yeah.
Are all the budget bills even printed yet?
I don't know the answer to that, but I assume they're not all printed.
Okay. So I think we have 3 before us, and we did
Yeah.
one minor one the other day, but the big ones are yet to come. We have about 8.5 hours. So if it's our job to be on time, isn't it the governor's job to get the budget done in a timely manner so that we have our 3 days to review as we're constitutionally required to do?
I won't blame why we're here, because all of us have been involved, the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor, in discussions. So all of us would have something to say. And I've got to be careful what I say because I may get another preaching to.
Well, you may have to be careful about what you say, but I don't. And most certainly,
Do you read newspapers?
most certainly, not all of us were involved. About 4 people were involved in this budget at the leadership level, but certainly very few in this room were involved in this budget. And we certainly haven't seen the final details of the budget. And as you said earlier, all this has been out there for some time. That's only true in the abstract, right? Because there are changing numbers all the time. Even from what we've seen over the past 24 hours, some numbers have changed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then how can we be expected to do our job as legislators if we aren't afforded the time that really it's a lack of respect, not only to this chamber and the other chamber, but to the people of New York, to not give us that time? But how can we be expected to digest a budget that is $150 or so billion in 8 hours?
Well, it's not 150. It's not 158. It would be about 100. I would say about 150.
Right. That's
because all of that has been in what we're going to approve.
right.
In
That's
other
what I
words,
said. I
and we've
think,
been-
or
and it's
150 or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the amount.
Give or take 8 billion.
I'm sorry, no.
Give or take 8 billion.
That's right,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Yeah.
As I remember, it was a very much short money and it got to mothership.
Yeah.
But the amount of money, you'll find that it's going to be, as I said, approximately 95% of what we're passing tonight and today. That amount of money, I mean, that time, all of those programs we've had on, and we got it from the governor. We left it what it was, and it's what we're going to vote on. There's a small amount of it, which then becomes major when we fight about it now. But those things, again, are things that we've had numbers on in different variations. A lot of the money we're going to come up with is going to be shifting of money as opposed to creating of money.
Right. That's what I want to
But
get
we'll be staying within the number.
Right.
So we believe that when we finish getting everything done, that we're going to close down. We're going to go to our different offices, rooms, and then we'll talk about what it is, and then we'll come back on the floor and debate it. But when you hear what the numbers are, it won't be a shock. It's something you've seen before, and you'll understand it.
But there are, well, a couple of things, Denny. There's some shocking numbers in here already, and this is just the first of many disappointing budget bills that we'll see. There's already some very shocking numbers. But if the logic is that, well, it's $150 billion, just shut up and vote, then just put out one budget bill that says $150 billion, and we're going to divide it up however the 3 men in a room or 4 men in a room see fit. But I want to get into a couple of the shifting of those numbers as you just talked about. Under workers' comp reform, Denny, there's $140 million for the partial payment to the state insurance fund for the coverage of state employees for workers' comp. Is that number square with what you have, $140 million? So that's the partial payment. Any idea what the full payment, how short are they over there?
About 350.
$350 million short in the workers' comp fund. That's just for state employees, right?
That's the annual payment we give them every year.
We give them $350?
Yes.
Then how, if we give them $350, so this $140, has this been in past budgets where there's been well, if we're giving them 350, where is the other one, whatever, where's the other money coming from? If this is only 140, when are we getting them the rest?
From the general fund.
So another sweep out of the general fund?
Yeah, it goes there, yes. That's appropriated.
Who's funding this fund right now? The private sector, right? And the state employees themselves. Everybody gets it taken out of their paycheck.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if they're funding it themselves every 2 weeks out of their pay, because I get it out of mine, everybody gets it taken out, how are they short?
That's right. It's paid by the board. It doesn't come out of your paycheck. It comes out from your boss's paycheck.
Come- Yeah.
The boss that pays for it.
Or the boss pays for it?
Someone was saying that.
Okay. Yeah. So right now, if I'm an employer, I'm funding this every week, 2 weeks, whatever. I'm funding it for my employees, right? And you said earlier that we are shifting how many millions? A lot. 300 million. How much is getting swept out of the workers' comp fund? There's 140 million there. There's 60 to redesign infrastructure. There's 40 to expand a couple of things, and apparently 10 million for paid family leave, which we don't even have details on. So how much is getting swept out of the workers' comp fund into the general fund or the state insurance fund or anywhere else?
It's being switched. What, say that again? Yeah, we send 375 to them. So, and they get the money. We give them our money, and then they put that out. For what? Interest rate? So say that again?
Yeah, I have about 240, Denny, maybe $250 million.
No.
Well, it's at
What's
least
our
that.
number? 375.
Oh, it's more than that, 375. Okay, I'm sorry, I was off. So 375 million that is paid in by the private sector
Right.
into this fund.
Yes.
Is it okay if I'm a private sector? And that's, by the way, that's just what's being swept.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more. There's billions that goes in there, but that's just what is being swept, like a three-card Monte type of
Right.
game. But that's being swept out. If I'm a private sector employer, would it be okay with the state of New York if I were to say, you know what, I'm not going to put that money into that fund. I'm going to move it somewhere else, like my bottom line, my pocket, or maybe I'm going to buy new equipment. Is that acceptable to the state of New York?
I would not answer the question because the question is, if he did that, he's not going to be. If he's putting the money someplace else, he's going to have other money to pay in.
Shouldn't the state have the same requirement?
Well, we do in the end. We have the money to do what it's supposed to do, so we do have the money for it.
But that money, Denny, is there to pay workers' comp claims. That's why it's there. Just like the Highway and Bridge Trust Fund is there to rebuild our highways and bridges, which we sweep and sweep and sweep, which is probably why they're falling apart. But that money's there for a purpose, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother you at all that we can just, as the state, just grab money essentially from the private sector and just say, whatever. Now you're short. And by the way, didn't they get hit for a giant surcharge a couple years ago because we were short on workers' comp? Didn't they get hit?
That was back in 2008.
Dave, how long? Like 5 years? How long?
Yeah. Yes, we did have problems, and the problems were as I said earlier, the economy didn't do well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were not with jobs, so it went up. But again, the payer didn't have to pay for it. didn't have to pay above what he paid normally.
Oh, there was a surcharge though, Denny. So it
Yeah,
was
and we paid that. We raised the money and paid that.
you raised it off.
Yeah,
the
in
private
other
sector.
words, I'm telling you that everybody who was entitled to get every week paycheck when they were on not working, they continued to get it. We got the money from other places, and we did it.
Sure.
Even though the money that was to be spent was not all there, we put it in and put it out.
Correct. We're saying the same thing, Denny. We got the money from other places, those other places being the private sector employers that are funding it to begin with. That's
No,
where the other
and
money
we,
came from.
And we put it in through the amount of money we put in when we do the budget.
But do you think we would have had to maybe even have done that surcharge if we weren't continuously sweeping out of the fund? Maybe the fund would have a giant surplus if we weren't
Well, I could
continually
say that-
using it as a piggy bank.
I would say that they may have borrowed it, but they put it back.
The they is important, Denny. The they is the private sector employer of New York.
No,
It's
it
not
isn't,
the
because we are
state.
putting some of our money from other places.
Where do we get our money?
We get it from all sorts of things. You want to go back to the throughway? Their money goes into a big pot, and then it comes out.
But ultimately,
But you keep track of the numbers of where you're putting them.
we get every dime from the taxpayer of New York through sales
Oh,
tax,
yeah,
income
everything
tax,
does.
property tax. That's where it comes from. It comes
Yes.
from the taxpayer and the employer and everything
But again, as I said earlier, it's for the surface. It's to help people who are taxpayers who need help because for a moment something went wrong.
else. I completely agree, and I guess I would contend that we'd be in a lot better position to help those people that need the help if we weren't sweeping it
you'd
out.
be right if they didn't make the decision, if they didn't get it. But everybody, when they're entitled to their once a week unemployment, they get it. We don't say, I'm sorry, we don't have it. So no matter what's going on, that's paid.
There's nothing you say that I disagree with, Denny. I would just disagree that I would say that if we left it alone and weren't continuously sweeping it, we wouldn't find ourselves in these positions where we have to backfill it. Let me move on for just a second because there's apparently in here there's $40 million for the workers' comp board to expend, and part of that $40 million is $10 million for paid family leave. Yet, established paid family leave is intentionally omitted from this bill. Is there any language that you have that we don't or that the people in New York don't have on paid family leave?
I think we said it earlier. We're not. This will not go into effect for 2 years. So then we'll be doing other times when we will put things before you that will explain that.
Okay. Put things before us today in the
No,
budget.
not today.
Not today. So there won't be any.
Oh no, yes. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay. No, that's fine. What budget bill would it be in? Because it seems like public protection and general government would certainly encompass a paid family leave. Where else is it?
Well,
where
as
else would it fit?
you see in the bills we're doing now, they all have some things taken out of it, but we decided that we should start debating now. So those bills will end up in another bill at the end,
Yeah.
and that'll be one of them that will explain that.
Okay, and so there's $10 million in there. That's the beginning of the paid family leave fund.
Yes, startup money.
Weren't we assured early on in the debate that it was the employees that would be funding it through a
No,
payment?
nobody said that. It will be. Yeah, it will be later.
It will be later, but we're front loading it with $10 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Denny, thank you. Appreciate it. It's going to be a long day. I appreciate all your hard work on this, Denny. I really do.
You can make it short.
I don't know if I can. I'm trying, but there's so much to talk about, Denny. Mr. Speaker, on the bill, I know I only have a couple of seconds here, but I think this is the beginning of a long day that's going to point out what a Ponzi scheme this whole entire budget is. It's not much more than a shell game, and it's not a heck of a lot different than what Bernie Madoff sits in jail for. We're shifting money all over the place, taking it from one place where people expected it to be, moving it away into another place where it does not belong at all. And I think the people in New York need to realize that they're being played here and that we need to stick to what the budget is supposed to do. You pay into a fund, that's where that money should rest. We see it in workers' comp. We see it in bridge and highway trust. We see it all over the state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Graff.
Will the chairman yield?
Mr. Farrell, will you yield?
Yes, I will, Mr. Speaker, yes.
Farrell yields.
Hi, Denny, thank you. The Criminal Justice Reform Act, that was omitted intentionally, correct? Part A.
Yes,
Now, is that getting stuck somewhere else, or is that omitted?
yes, it may be in. Maybe, I say.
Do we know where? Oh, we're still working on that one?
Yeah, they're still working on it.
Okay. Now, the other one is, I think it's Part B, where the district attorneys with money, certain portions of money recovered in a settlement. You see that part of it? And they break it out 10% of the first 25 million, 7.5%. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this could also be restitution. So if a person is about to be indicted for stealing money, okay,
Yeah,
then what would happen is this would also include restitution. A portion of the state would get the restitution. A portion of the restitution would go to the state, right?
yes. Yes,
So the state's charging a vig on this if we're getting money back?
oh.
Right. Let me replace the word vig with like a finder's fee.
Yeah, they compensate the people who were injured because of the program, of what was done, and then they do it. So if they don't get, so we get after they get.
Yeah, I think what it says is after injured parties have been appropriately compensated.
Yes.
Well, what do we mean? Who decides what's appropriate compensation? I mean, can we say, listen, we recovered
The
100...
DA does.
Okay, so we can... Now, the DA, did they get a portion of this, too?
Yes.
Okay, so the DA can turn around and say, look, we recovered all the money that the person stole, but we'll give you 3/4, and 1/4 we're going to split with the state?
No, I think they give them back the money they stole, and they take additional money from the person who committed the crime. So they're not buying themselves out with the stolen money, they're buying themselves out with their other money.
Okay, so basically what they're doing is they're going to pay back the money they stole, and then we're going to negotiate a price so they don't get charged
Yeah,
with a crime.
yeah, I don't know exactly, but it sounds right.
Okay.